chapter 19. Jeremiah chapter 19. Remember, last time we looked at the potter, the parable on the potter and the clay. And this is a continuation of that same sermon that the Lord gave to Jeremiah to preach to the people of Jerusalem. So let's start with verse 1, chapter 19, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord, go and get a potter's earthen bottle, and take of the ancients of the people, and of the ancients of the priests. I read a couple of different things on this, and everybody has their own take on it, I think. But if you read the rest of the chapter, I'm kind of leaning towards this take of the ancients. And you notice that word take is in italics, so it was added by the translators to hopefully to help us understand what this is talking about. I'm understanding this to mean that this of the ancients of the people and the ancients of the priests is the writings of them. Some say it's that he was actually taking earthen vessels that were old, and but I think it, and I may be wrong here. We'll see. Maybe the Lord will show us something different as we read on. But I'm understanding him to say that he's taken an earthen bottle or other earthen vessel and placed in it the ancients, the writings of the people, and they did that a lot in that day, as they stored a lot of the scrolls were stored in earthen vessels. If you've ever studied anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls, those were found in a cave in earthen vessels. That wasn't uncommon in their day. So let's read on. And go forth unto the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the east gate, and proclaim there the words that I shall tell thee. So, this valley of Hinnom, or the son of Hinnom, we've looked at before. If you remember, and we'll see more of this in this study in a moment, if I can keep from sneezing. It just hit me. The valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the east gate. This was a place there in Jerusalem, or close to outside the city gate. If you remember, they had gotten so wicked they had built a false god out there in that valley, and it was very similar to Molech. And matter of fact, it was a form of the god Baal, which I can't remember the hyphen it goes along with it. It's not listed here in this chapter, and I didn't think to look it up. But it was so that they would set a fire in it. It was a metal, or some type of metal. Sometimes, depending on what part of the world they were in back then, but in some societies, when they had this same type of god, it was either bronze or iron. In other places, it was other things, but mostly, usually it was bronze because it would heat up quicker. And so they had this false god outside the city gates of Jerusalem, in this land, this valley of Hinnom, or this valley of the son of Hinnom. So, he tells Jeremiah to go there to this valley and proclaim the words that I shall tell thee. He's to go there and preach, in other words. And this is why I think this of the ancients of the people, and of the ancients of the priests, I think that's where I understand this to be. These are, whether it's the word of the law, or it's something that God had given them in writing. because he's telling him to go there, to take those things and go there and preach these words to the people. So, verse 3, and say, Hear ye the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will bring evil upon this place, the which whosoever heareth, his ears shall tingle. So, the Lord is going to, he says, notice he says there in the middle of the verse, this is the Lord speaking, I will bring evil upon this place. Now, today we hear God is love. That's all we hear about from the world, the religious world, I should say, and those who in the world who don't actually know Him. You know, you can if someone's preaching and saying that God's only love, they don't know Him very well, because obviously in this case He's had enough and He's bringing evil on His own people. Remember, they're His own people. This is Israel. This is God's people. And this is the city of God, Jerusalem. This is where His temple is. This is where His house is, or was, until He removed Himself from it. Because, in verse 4, because they have forsaken me and have estranged this place, and have burned incense in it unto other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, nor the kings of Judah, and have filled this place with the blood of innocents. He's talking about the valley of the son of Hinnom, because that's where they had built this false god. And here he says he says other gods. So there was more than just that one there. But that one we know more about than any other, because it was a popular false god in that day. Not just in Jerusalem, but in other places in that part of the world. But notice he says the blood of innocents. What does he mean by that? Well, in this false god, this altar to this false god, they would set a fire in it and they would throw their children in it. And that's what he's talking about, the blood of innocents. They have built also the high places of Baal, to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither came it into my mind. And think about this. You see movies, we read stories. If you took history class, you read stories of these pagan societies that they throw the virgin to the volcano, that type of thing, or they the princess, they feed her to the fire god or whatever. That wasn't something new. And those societies that I'm speaking of, some of them were here in our own nation at one time. Some were, in Central South America. The Pacific Islands were popular with those things. There were other places around the world, but those are the places that we know of, and we probably have seen stories about. But it wasn't new. The people in Jerusalem itself were doing the same thing, except for with their children. And he says to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal. What did God tell them to use for burnt offerings? Different animals. They never were to use people, ever. You wouldn't even do this to your enemy. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that this place shall no more be Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. Tophet was just another name for it. But the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. It's going to be, and we'll see here in a moment, he tells more, but the valley is going to be so full of bodies from the siege that there's not going to be room to bury everybody. And I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place. and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hands of them that seek their lives. And their carcasses will I give to the meat for the fowls of the heaven, and for the beasts of the earth. And I will make this city desolate and unhissing. Everyone that passes by thereby shall be astonished and hiss because of all the plagues thereof. And remember, we've talked about this a lot. Jerusalem was on the trade routes, so there were people for many generations. People went through Jerusalem, going to other places. They went there to trade. They went through there, going to other places, and so they're going to see the things that are going on there and what's happened, and this hissing that he's talking about. They're going to see that Jerusalem's no longer the city that it once was. Their God has forsaken them, is what the talk of the world's going to be. In verse 9, and I will cause them to eat. Notice God is still saying, I will. You see that? I want you to pay attention to that from now on through the rest of this study. Because God, He says it a lot. A whole lot. Everything bad that's going to happen to Israel, God says, I'm the one doing it. I will bring it to them. And that's what He's doing. In verse 9, and I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they shall eat every one the flesh of his friend in the siege, and straightness wherewith their enemies, and they that seek their lives shall straighten them. They're going to turn to cannibalism. That's how bad it's going to get. That's how bad this siege is going to get. They're going to run out of food, and they're going to turn on each other. First it'll be the young, and then it's going to be their neighbor. He says their friend. Whoever the weakest among them, are going to be the ones to go first. Then shalt thou break the bottle in the sight of the men that go with thee. Now this is going back to verse 1. Remember, he said back in verse 1, thus saith the Lord, go and get a potter's earthen bottle. So that's the bottle he's talking about. This one that he has put the things of the ancients and the people and the ancient prophets. He tells him to break it in the sight of the men that go with thee. So not just in private. He's supposed to break it where everybody will see it. Then, and shalt say unto them, thus saith the Lord of hosts, even so will I break these people and this city, as one breaketh a potter's vessel that cannot be made whole again. And they shall bury them in Tophet till there be no place to bury. The Lord's going to break Israel. He's going to break them, and break them in a way that they're not going to be repairable, is what he says. Now we know that the Lord is going to call Israel back to himself at some point, but in the future, and it hasn't happened yet, but it will. But he's going to break them, and it's not going to be repairable, is what he says. Remember, if you break a piece of pottery, you can't put it back on the wheel and repair it. Sorry, my allergies have been bothering me all day. And it's going to be so bad, they're going to try to bury people in this place, in Tophet, or this valley of the son of Hinnom. And it's going to be so bad that they're going to run out of room to bury people. Thus will I do unto this place, saith the Lord, unto the inhabitants thereof, and even take this city, make this city as Tophet. The whole city of Jerusalem is going to become a graveyard. It's going to be a horrible place. And the houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah shall be defiled as the place of Tophet, because of all the houses upon whose roofs they have burned incense unto all the host of heaven, and have poured out drink offerings unto other gods. Now this host of heaven is not God, not the Trinity, not anything to do with that part of heaven. They're offering burnt incense unto the stars and the planets and the sun and the moon. That's their false gods. Astrology, if you will. And they poured out drink offerings. And they have taken the examples that God gave them in the law as far as what to offer sacrifices to Him, and now they're taking those things and they're offering them to false gods. Not to God, but to false gods. Then came Jeremiah from Tophet, whither the Lord had sent him, to prophesy. And he stood in the court of the Lord's house and said to all the people. So he's been down to Tophet, to the valley of the son of Hinnom, and he's preached there. Now he's come back into the city, and he's in the court of the Lord's house, into the court of the temple, and he's going to preach to everybody else there. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring upon this city and upon all her towns all the evil that I have pronounced against it, because they have hardened their necks, that they might not hear my words. Once again, God says, I will bring upon the city. Not just Jerusalem, but he says all her towns. In other words, all the suburbs of Jerusalem, all the cities of Judah, actually, is going to happen to all of them. But Jerusalem and her suburbs, he's going to, he says, I will bring upon them the evil that I have pronounced against it. So everything he's told them is going to happen. You know, God's told them a whole lot so far. Now, he hasn't told them all of it. There's more to come. And we'll get into more of that next time. But remember in this study, pay attention to when he says, I will. And remember, it's God that's saying that. Not Jeremiah, but God that says, I will do this, I will do that. I'm bringing this, I'm bringing that. Even the evil, God is the real one bringing it on them. And for whatever reason, God's people today think that God won't do it to us today. He gets enough ever so often. And when he does, he can hit us with a plague. He could be a natural disaster. It could be anything. Whatever he chooses to use. Our economy could collapse. And famine, pestilence, whatever the Lord chooses to use, whatever he takes, whatever he chooses to use to cause his people to turn back to him. Does it affect the rest of the world? Yeah, many times it does. Many times it affects people many times it affects the innocent people. What's going to happen in Jerusalem, it's going to affect Jeremiah, and he hasn't done anything wrong. He's followed the Lord, remember? And there's a remnant there that's followed the Lord. But they're all going to suffer from it because of what the other people have done, what the nation as a whole has done. They have forsaken the Lord. They have turned their back on him. They've done some of the most horrible things you could ever imagine. You know, we've already read they were sacrificing their children. There's going to come a time during the siege where they're going to turn to cannibalism on their own children. And that Jeremiah goes into detail in that. We'll see it later. But they had done some of the most horrible acts imaginable. And still try to claim the name of the Lord. And we see it today. People do some of the most horrible stuff and still want to try to claim the name of the Lord. So remember these things, and keep in mind, like I said, it's these two words, I will. Remember that. We'll pick up with chapter 20 next time.